Welcome to Let's Talk Global Business, the show in which we look at the economic and business trends connecting the world. I'm Sarah Murray, Managing Director International at the Conference Board, the member-led global think tank that delivers trusted insights for what's ahead. In this episode, we're focused on how organisations can effectively talk about their sustainability efforts without falling into the trap of greenwashing. Let me start by introducing my guests for today. From the US, we have Amy Belcourt, Vice President of Communications, Professional Hygiene at Essity. And joining us from Europe, Edvard Bergström, Vice President of Corporate Communications, Relations and Production at Sandvik, and Mats Lundberg, Head of Sustainability at Sandvik. Amy, Edvard and Matt, maybe you can start by each giving us a brief overview of your background and roles and your experience in sustainability communications. Amy, would you like to go first?
Sure. So I've been at Essity, formerly known as SCA, for about 18 years, and I've been in communications roles the entire time, and I've worked with our professional hygiene business for that entire time. And just to let you know what professional hygiene is, it's paper towels, napkins, toilet paper that people use in commercial settings like airports or office buildings. And in terms of the sustainability aspect to that, sustainability has been part of this Torque brand that is part of professional hygiene. But I think obviously most of us probably can recognize that the last few years it's become a bigger part of what we communicate. I have no formal sustainability training. It's really on the job learning. And I would say that really is what's been necessary as a communicator to become more educated, to understand both the compliance issues as well as the communications challenges. And that's what I've been doing for the last 10 or 15 years of my job, is really on the job learning, lots of training, lots of conferences to really build my sustainability understanding.
Thank you. Edvard, would you like to go next?
Sure, I'll jump in. I recognize a lot of what you said, Amy. I look after the external communication, put it simply, at the Sandvik Group. So we look after our corporate storytelling, our campaigns, our podcast, and similar things, but also then looking after sustainability communications. I've been in this role for more than 7 years. So started off my career in PR, in the PR world, and also at different both B2C and B2C companies, where, as Amy pointed out, sustainability communication has become more and more important. I would say, especially when I picked up my role at Sandvik, that became part of my daily job to really communicate around all of the things we do at Sandvik. And Sandvik Group we're present in different industries. We are quite big within the mining industry, where we produce equipment for mines around the world. We don't run any mines our own, but we supply the mining companies with their equipment. We also have a big part in the manufacturing industries. We provide tools and tooling solutions, software, etc., to different companies working with, for example, aerospace, automotive, and so on.
Mats?
Yes, I have been with Sandvik for 15 years. So the last 8 years I've been in various sustainability roles, but my background is really in R&D. So my first 7 years at Sandvik was that I worked as a researcher developing materials used in hydrogen and fuel cells, which of course has a sustainability connection. And also outside of Sandvik, I've done a postdoc and a scientist position in Denmark at the National Center for Renewable Energy, and also worked a bit in sales. So my background is PhD and a Master of Science in Materials. So I don't have a formal sustainability education either. But I'm totally geeky when it comes to sustainability anyway. So I'm equally geeky at home, having solar panels and electrified vehicles and so on. But my communications connection, as Edward said here, is maybe more about being the public speaker or the voice out related to what Sandvik does and how we try to integrate sustainability into our business and our business offering.
Thank you. Impressive backgrounds. So let's move the discussion to sustainability storytelling and how it started. Can anyone give a history of sustainability communications? What were the early drivers of sustainability communications? Amy, do you want to start?
Well, I'm not an expert on the history of it, but I can talk about sort of the history of my own company. The company that Essity was before it split from SCA was a company whose roots were in the Swedish forest. SCA is a company that is the largest owner of private forests in the world. So some people talk about sustainability being in a company's DNA. I think at SCA, the sustainability is in the company's roots, literally. And so really there was such a focus on sustainability, and the company had sustainability reports for at least 2 decades before people had really heard about sustainability reports. And then I think in Europe we saw this move where suddenly people were talking about it. And I remember probably 16, 17 years ago, there was a newspaper article, and it was about an organization that had rated the most sustainable companies in the world. And the first one, if I'm remembering correctly, might have been a wind farm in Denmark or somewhere in the Nordics. And the second most sustainable company was SCA. And we were like, wow, what's this mean? And speaking, I think this is maybe a good bridge later to this concept of how you tell a green story and the idea of greenwashing. Of course, we talked about this a lot. We told customers about it. We told our employers we're the second greenest company in the world. And for us, and the irony, of course, is that today I still have people, because we have people that work here a long time, who say we're the second greenest company in the world, and the world has evolved since then. So I think for us, that's where the storytelling began, when suddenly it became news and we realized that there was an appetite for understanding sustainability.
Interesting. Mats, Edvard, anything you want to add?
I can start. Edward here. I think that if you look at Sandvik as a company, similar to SCA Essity, we have a long history, legacy in Sweden. We were founded in 1862, and I think that for us, sustainability has always, in one way or another, been part of what we do. I think that if you take sustainability and add the social aspect of it, like, for example, the community aspect, it has always been a big thing for our founder and his family, and sort of the foundation that exists now from the old founding family, to work a lot with efforts that sort of strengthen the local community. And there was a lot of activations of the workers in Sandviken that worked at the old steel mill, etc. So it's always been around in one way or another. And nowadays it is incorporated in the business that we do, that I think Mats might be able to talk a bit more about. But if I then go outside of the world of Sandvik, which is always interesting, I think what the first memory that I have in my mind around sustainability and sustainability communication is actually from Patagonia, and the thing that they did around Black Friday. I think it was back in 2011, where they posted an ad in the New York Times saying, "Don't buy this jacket." Sort of a call out to the consumers to think before you consume. And they did this by an ad of their own jacket, asking people not to buy it. And that's sort of the first early memory I have of a company really taking a stance in this area.
Interesting. Thanks. Mats?
No, but I agree, and not coming from the communications background really. I've seen it from maybe different aspects. Also being a gamer, and I remember going out with my son and playing Pokemon Go, and then Pokemon Go did this Earth Day cleanup back in 2018, which was a completely new way of using a platform to get engagement in an important topic. And I thought that was brilliant, how you can impact and influence using your platform and your brand to do good. And I think that is another sort of eye-opening example on how you can communicate and get through to people that are maybe not really the the engaged people to begin with, but they become engaged because of the communication, because of the platform and the messaging, and being part of this family, or this sort of tribe of like-minded people doing something together. And I think that was really, really beautiful.
And a very innovative and different channel in which to communicate that story as well. That's really a pioneer, really, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it did they did something completely new, and also they used this sort of being part of a tribe or a herd or whatever you want to call it, to change something for the better, and the result was fantastic. And I think they didn't do just 1 year, they've kept on doing it every year, and it keeps growing, and they included also ocean cleanup and so on and so forth. So I think it's a good example on how you can use your communication and make an impact in a smart way.
Mm, mm. And was there a moment you think the idea of companies talking about sustainability really went mainstream? I mean, Amy, you talked about 16, 17 years ago seeing that article. Was that the moment, or do you think it was before that?
I don't know that it was really on the radar, and I'm not even sure that that article put it on the radar, right? Because I think one of the key learnings around communicating about sustainability is that different target audiences, different segments of humans are in different places. They're interested in it at different times. And so part of the challenges of being a communicator is sort of the difficulty in a one size fits all message, meaning what you're saying, but also who you're saying it to. So I think, like many things, there's an early adopter phase, and that might include, for sustainability, the investor community. It might include people that are environmental activists and have been for many decades. And then it starts to move down through the different audiences to where you get to the real consumer. And I was happy to hear Mats talk about going on Pokemon Go with his son, because I certainly did a lot of Pokemon Go with my kids too. And they're kids, right? And we know that kids are very interested in issues related to sustainability. So that's another key target audience. So what you do in each target audience changes, and I think the timing of when it became relevant also changes.
Interesting, thank you. Mats and Edvard, anything you want to add about when you think this went mainstream?
I think that sustainability has gone through different phases, and I think the communication has accompanied those phases. Because if you look back, you had, people, planet, profit, and then you moved on, and you had the sort of CSR type of movement, and that had a certain type of communication, and then it moved into becoming more, I would say now, is more business centric, which means that communication also has changed to, become more honest, I think more to the point and more data driven than it's been historically. If you look back, it maybe was more to look good and seem to do good, and now it's actually about doing good. And that has been a transformation along this journey of sustainability as well. And sustainability has grown what to include as well, because before it was sort of, oh, let's do social responsibility, and now it's okay, let's include the environmental aspects or business, anti-bribery, corruption, and so sustainability has become much bigger, which means also the communication had to develop and become bigger. That's my sort of amateur view look of it, coming from the outside, but it has transformed with how sustainability has transformed.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that also, of course, goes hand in hand with how society or the world has evolved. I mean, there are a lot more expectations on us. The target audiences that we want to reach have more understanding, more knowledge about the topic and the different areas of the topic of sustainability, as you say, Mats. And they're also more, they put more demands on us as companies to really talk to the topics and that resonate with them. So that is also something that has changed quite a bit in the last 5, 6, 7 years, I would say.
You talked a bit, Edvard, about audiences becoming a bit more demanding. How do you think their expectations have evolved? Do you think people are more skeptical, they're more engaged, they're both, that it's different depending on the different kind of groups? What's been your experience with at Sandvik?
Well, I think both, actually. I think they are much more engaged with the topic as such, which in that way also make them more skeptical in a sense. So now you really need to make sure that you have something to ground the things you're communicating on. You need to really talk about the things that you're actually doing and showing actual effects. There's no longer, I think, there's no longer enough to just talk about ambitions. You need to have something that also backs up the things that you're saying. So if you look at how we are trying to do this, we're trying to take the things that we are doing within the company, how we are helping our customers to become more sustainable, which is part of our business story that Mats talked a little bit about, and then highlight these in context, pick up on trends, etc., that are relevant to the different target audiences that we want to reach, but always to have it grounded in something we actually do in the business. I think that's really important given the mature audiences that we're trying to reach.
And to build trust, right, and build, the brand strength as well. You've got to walk the talk.
For sure. I mean, we as a company are also part of many of these lists that you talked about, Amy, the most sustainable company in the world, etc. And that gives us, we need to live up to that. We need to build that trust and don't break the trust not with the consumer, maybe in our case, since we are a business-to-business company, but for us, it's a lot around the brand and also around the employer brand. We need to make people want to work for us and in the industries that we serve. And then we need to show that we are sustainable, and we need to communicate that in a credible way.
And Amy, if you think about the different channels, so we've touched on some of them, we've got social media, we've got annual reports, we've got influencers, partnerships. How's that shaping the tone and the style of the communications story?
I think regardless of what audience you're in, the world is shifting towards shorter messaging. More specific messaging. And the days of somebody wanting to pore over an annual sustainability report and dig in deep, there are still people that do that, investor analyst community, NGOs, but really the average person is not doing that. So you have to be able to, I think the challenge to telling a sustainability story is that first of all, they're complicated. It's very hard to be easy. Broad statements are usually not great statements and really can probably border on greenwashing. But you then have to be able to figure out what are the relevant things you can say in a bite-sized way to really, use social media the way it should be used. How do you take the information from your annual and sustainability report and report pieces of that people are willing to consume? And then how do you use those influencers, whether they're, third-party accrediting organizations or actually influential people to help, to verify and also echo your story. But it's really about creating relevant, shorter pieces because that's how people process information today.
So just to build a little bit on that, Amy, that I really agree, and how we try to approach it, we talk about fame when we create our campaigns, and what we mean by that is not fame in the sense that we have famous people or famous influencers that we connect to our communication, rather that we create communication that can create fame within the target audience. So something that they are interested with, something that appeals to a broad audience that we can then bring down the funnel and talk maybe about a deeper sustainability story about that. So it's about finding something that is creative enough to attract a lot of people and sort of start a conversation around that topic, which could show, for example, then the broader impact of a sustainability solution that we can provide to one of our customers. And then we sort of narrow the funnel down to tell the deeper story of how we have created this solution together with our customers, with the engineering solution behind it, the people that have done this, etc., to sort of position ourselves as a responsible company that can make a difference.
Mats, your experience?
Yeah, but me coming from a researcher, being an engineer, we're the square gray ones, right? To me, to appear to be sustainable, you must, of course, be sustainable. There is no way you can change that. That is the core of the business, and there is no marketing department in the world that could spin that unless you truly are sustainable at the core. And I think it has to start there. You need to have the your ducks in a row, or before you stand on the rooftops and scream your lungs off to the world, you need to make sure that you've cleared out your basement, right? There shouldn't be any skeletons there, and I think for me that is truly important. And when I come to Edvard and when we collaborate, I come with data, I come with facts, and one of the simple rules that we established over the years was sort of So a simple rule of thumb saying you're not allowed to communicate about it until you actually done it. And that's, I think, very simple starting point. You cannot go and claim bragging rights unless you actually have performed what you said you should do. And that helps, I think, in the next step of the communication, because then you have something tangible. You can go out to the engineers in the field or show a machine, or show the actual improvement in reduction of CO2 because you installed a new furnace or whatever you've done. You have the proof points, and then the storytelling becomes more simple. It's easy to then explain, well, how did you reduce it? Well, we did this X, Y, and Z, and we can attach facts and figures, and we can tell a story with a person who actually done it, and not necessarily only me or Edward, someone in the field, and that becomes trustworthy.
And obviously having the communications department, the sustainability department collaborating so that you've got that narrative grounded in fact, grounded in reality. How do you tread the line between creativity and engagement on the one hand, and then authenticity, on the other? Amy, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I'm just reflecting on what Mats said, because I think we potentially take a slightly different approach, which is, of course, when we have accomplishments and data to prove an accomplishment, we share that information. But I believe a lot of what we're communicating, whether it's in Essity or for the Torque brand, is also the journey. And there's no perfect solution to anything, but there is a journey, and our customers are on a journey as well as our consumers. So we do talk about things that are not completed, things that we're testing, things that we're piloting, our ambition, but we phrase it that way. We don't claim that we've succeeded if we haven't succeeded, but we want them to understand that part of the attraction of our company and our brand is the fact that we are investing in innovation, that we are looking on how to move the journey forward, both for our company and other companies in our industry, because we are a leader in our industry. So I think the creativity can come in around how you tell that story, how you engage people in what is a pilot, is an idea, is something that you're investing in, but maybe don't necessarily can say firmly, this is absolutely the solution, because I don't think a lot of things in sustainability are quite that cut and dry. There is always an opportunity to improve and always an opportunity to try something. So we've sort of evolved more to trusting that our customers and consumers will go along with us on a journey.
Interesting. Thank you. Matt and Edvard, what challenges come up when you're trying to align internal teams around a sustainability message? What's happened in your experience within Sandvik?
Well, I think one of the difficulties is always how forward-leaning you want to be, and I think you said it nicely as well. Of course, we also have innovations that we talk about and so on, but this sort of balance between with how much should we lean forward here and now from a group perspective, and then you have like a big picture point of view, and then becoming quite specific on product level. And I think sometimes there, me and Edward are maybe the more forward-leaning ones, and sometimes the product owners are a bit maybe playing it a bit more safe than me and Edward wants to do. I think me and Edward takes a wider sort of approach to things and are a bit more wild and crazy on our ideas. So I think finding a good balance that makes sense from both sides, because you want to talk and tell the investor story, but you also want to tell the customer story, and sort of how do you marry them so it works. I think that is something that we've seen a few times. You maybe have some addition to that, Edward.
But no, I couldn't agree more. I think it is important for us to do both. We get sort of allowance to talk about the vision for an industry, etc. When we have proof points to back it up with. We don't have to have the full story. And to your point, Amy, I think it's really important to talk about the vision, because that's also something that I think will help drive innovations. If we have a vision for where we're going, if we take the mining industry as an example, our vision for that is to create the sustainable mine of the future that is fully electrified, fully automized. We're not there yet, but we have the best solution for it today. However, the journey to come there in 5, 10, 15, 20 years, however long it will take, that will be a journey where you need to take people along. And I think that's a storytelling in itself, how to take them along on the journey. We have this sort of objective, the target, which we all need to go. Everyone needs to come to that to that point if we should manage the green transition of the world, because we need the minerals, we need all of that comes from the ground. So we need the sustainable mining. And for us to tell that story is super important. And we have a good alignment internally about that. Then, as Mats said, it can be, let's put it like, discussions on when we talk about what on this journey.
Amy, any examples of challenges to align internal teams?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges is really around people that are customer facing. And what we're seeing, particularly in Europe now, and a little bit more in the United States with large international companies, is the drive for data. This really comes, in part from the CSRD legislation in Europe, but, this desire for carbon data. And, the reality is, if you a company that is making something and can provide it because you're doing the life cycle analysis, which not all companies are doing, there are there's not one way to present carbon data. And so oftentimes your competitors might be presenting it in a way that makes them look great, and sometimes better than you. And you have to really be very thoughtful around how you actually are now presenting that data, the story you're telling, how you're shaping it, and also working with your teams, your customer facing teams, be they customer service or sales, to be able to explain it as well, to be able to characterize why how we're doing it is actually the correct and ethical way to do it, transparent, how to sort of go through what the competitors are doing, and maybe they're not actually, maybe they're picking one great piece of data and amplifying it in a way. And so there's anxiety there. Are the sales teams ready to share data like this? Are they educated enough? Do they understand? Do the customers really know how to interpret that data? And sometimes one thing we make, two things we might not always have the best result on the data, right? So how do you continue to sell that product then with a bigger story and more, again, this overall sustainability commitment? So I think there's a good healthy tension there right now as we start to bring data into the market. And I'm going to say that both in working with customers in Europe as well as in the United States, the drive for data is real and it's growing.
Just a question, how do you make sure that the data and the storytelling stays connected, especially when you've got, you're working in different markets? Do you have the same story, or do you choose different stories for different markets, different regions?
Yeah, the way we did it for our Torque brand was that we worked closely with the larger, more sophisticated customers who had the earliest interest, and we co-created with them. What's valuable to you? How's it gonna work for you? We identified that were four sustainability areas that were the most important, and we created a construct around those areas, and we report out to our customers on those four areas. We also verified this through additional customer research, and so the data might be different in Europe than the United States because how we manufacture, the energy we use, those types of things are different in the United States and in Europe. But the construct, the way in which we bring the data to life is the same. So we are able to have a consistent approach. We as a company, even though we have manufacturing sites across Europe, have decided to have an aggregated or average for Europe rather than picking our best performing mill and only reporting on that because we think that's greenwashing. Instead, we create an average. So, it is one average for the country, for all of Europe, which makes it easier for the salespeople to start to learn with it. But there's a lot of work involved in this.
Mats, any experience with this?
No, but I think that as with all marketing, you need to adapt your message to your target audience. So if you're in Europe, you talk about climate change and CO2. If you're in India and China, you maybe focus more on water and clean air. And of course, you should adapt your messaging as with any marketing. So I think from that, we just need to provide different data points in the background but the work is still the same. Uh, Down the line, you will have more interest in water and in Europe as well, and same goes with air quality and so on. So I think it's more about using your different tools you have in your toolbox and then know when to use them. Not going around the world thinking that everything is nails. So you need a hammer, you need sometimes a screwdriver and a pair of pliers. It's simple as that, I think.
Yeah, great. We're going to take a short break. Please note that you can find a wealth of content on sustainability by visiting our website. When we come back, we'll be exploring some of the best practices companies can employ to authentically tell their sustainability stories.
Join us at the Conference Board's Future Reward Europe, happening on the 5th and 6th of June in Brussels. Explore cutting-edge thinking on pay equity, AI and compensation, employee experience, and more, all through a global lens. Hear from top reward leaders and connect with peers shaping the future of work. Register now at conference-board.org/rewards. Get insights, get inspired, get connected.
Hello and welcome back to this conversation on how organisations can tell their sustainability story effectively and authentically with Amy Belcourt, Edvard Bergström and Mats Lundberg. Let's look at regulatory and market risks. How are new regulations around environmental claims, such as the EU's Green Claims Directive, changing the way companies communicate about sustainability? What do you think are the risks for companies that get it wrong? Amy, do you want to take this?
I think the risks of getting it wrong are enormous damage to your brand, right? So, and that means trust in your from your customers, your consumers, and it's so important to get it right. But that doesn't mean you're always going to be perfect. Again, this is a really tricky space that's very dynamic. And what was perfectly fine thing to say 2 years ago might be absolutely inappropriate to say today. So, you know, we really consider things like the Green Claims Directive. We want scrupulous adherence to that. We really think very deeply. We have our claims reviewed. We think, we work very hard to be aligned with that. When it comes to, the markets or industries that really are focused on this the most. I mean, I think that there was a time again when maybe the investor analyst community was most engaged, but consumers are very easily dissuaded to your brand if you you say something inappropriate, wrong, not true, greenwash, whatever, when you're making claims about your products. And so, really, almost all levels of people who are interacting with your brand are starting to become sensitive to whether you're being truthful or not.
Thank you. Edvard?
I agree with that. And I think that, Mats, this one is more yours, maybe.
Yeah, the Green Claims Directive is maybe more towards business to consumer. So we are business to business. So we are not directly hit as Amy's company is, but I think there will be a wave effect that this will travel down the line for all companies, irrespectively if it's included in the law or not, because the expectation would still be the same from the consumer point of view, because they will not distinguish between Essity or Sandvik saying, oh, you're a B2C, so you're included, or you're B2B, you're not included. I think we will get the same treatment irrespectively. So I think we of course need to think on how we communicate, and again, if we ground it in good data and being transparent on how we present that data, I think that helps. But for sure, there is a risk of companies going into maybe more caution on how they phrase things compared to before the law was there. And I think that is kind of sad, because the good thing with companies actually communicating about this is also driving the transition that we need. So there will be a bit of an effect. But then on the other hand, it's also good that companies misusing the claims don't get away with it. And I think that is really good. You get a more fair playing field, but it also puts a lot more work for Edvard and Amy to and all the communication departments in the companies to know what to do and what to say than before. So there are upsides and downsides with this, I feel.
And we lose words that are understandable by the average person, right? So when you can't use the phrase something's green or eco-friendly, now you've got to, consumers have to catch up because that's the language they understand. And maybe it's too broad, planet friendly. Okay, people have misused it. They've thrown everything in there. But at the same time, we have to be able to communicate in a way that people actually understand what you're saying. And, consumers and even businesses haven't caught up necessarily with language that is more specific and scientific and technical. So there is a bridge we have to gap at this, we have to deal with at this point. How do we get people to be more interested in the things we say using the language we're allowed to use?
Amy, have you seen examples where regulation helped drive better and clearer sustainability communication?
Yeah, I mean, I think what Mats said, when there are some rules, then the bad players aren't able to be quite so bad. There is an inability to sort of overstate or exaggerate the green hushing, the green lighting, all of the different types of ways in which people misrepresent sustainability in communications. And just a comment also, in the United States, there are also green guidelines that have existed for some time through the Federal Trade Commission. They're in the process of being updated now. So, this is not just unique to Europe. It is something that the U.S. has also had. So I do think that the regulation and legislation does help us to help the bad players, but it can also feel a little bit restrictive at times.
If we think about best practices and case studies, what are some of the organisations that you've seen that ensure their sustainability narratives are compelling and credible? Can you share any examples, Mats?
Well, I think Edward used one of my favorite examples already with Patagonia that has a very clear and trustworthy communication, and I think they also connect very clearly with the tribe or the community of people who are interested in these topics, and they have, I think they have been a forerunner in many of these types of communication they've had, but also what they've done in their actual stores with having these buyback initiatives that you can actually go in and buy a secondhand jacket in a retail store. And then you saw all the other companies following suit. Like now you can see it in H&M and all of the other brands. They have all of this second-hand type business available, or you can rent your dress for one night and so on. We didn't see that before. So they from that, I think they revolutionized also how we look at business models and how we approach marketing and what we could do, because they opened up a door that wasn't there before, really, because we looked at things in a very traditional linear economy type of style. And now I think we've broke the glass ceiling a bit related to how we communicate about products and sustainability, like we didn't do before, because it was more of a CSR type approach. We do good things because we would like to look good. And now we have moved away from that and become a bit more bold. But that boldness, as we had in the previous question here, also requires some regulation so it doesn't become too wild and crazy, which is good. So hopefully it will stabilize, I think, going forward.
And I think that building a little bit on that, we have a Swedish energy company called Vattenfall that work a lot with this. They have this slogan or policy, we should call it, helping society break free from fossil fuels. And the one thing that I think they've done really well is that they are trying to fight a little bit of the climate anxiety that exists amongst many people around the world. It can sometimes feel hopeless, that you see the reports coming in from different organizations that we need to change this and that, and everything is more or less done already. But what they are doing is that they're highlighting the small steps on the way, sort of taking the consumer or the audience on a journey from, okay, we are here now, we need to go over here, but these are the steps that we can take along the way, and they communicate the small wins, which I think is a really nice way of doing it, because it also helps basically the consumer not to feel so hopeless.
Yeah, very good example. Yeah. Amy, anything you want to add?
I think one of the things we haven't talked about is as much as the social side of sustainability, and that is a key component of it. And an example that comes to mind for me is and I'll just pick another Swedish company that also operates in other places, but IKEA. And one of the programs that IKEA has run, and I think they started it actually in Middle East or Israel, was around how you can take IKEA furniture and adapt it to people who maybe have different physical needs. So whether it's, the height of a sofa or chair or how you turn a lamp on, people with different needs, they have created ways that they are providing for free adaptations to them, little key things you can do to adapt and make them more usable. So for me, this is also an interesting new way to really broaden the sustainability approach to how we really bring more people under the tent and really think about how we can use sustainability for social good as well.
Thank you. Personal question to all of you. Have you ever had to deal with a message backfiring, and what lessons could leaders learn from situations like that? Mats?
Wow. Yeah, that's a tricky question. I think, well, this was before Sandvik actually, but there was a claim related to a product that sort of overstated how good it actually was, and when getting the facts back, we realized that it was a numerical error that completely damaged the entire story. And I think the lesson learned there is to double check and triple check your data before actually going out, not being so keen on telling the story, and looking more on well, is the story correct, and sort of what is more important, the clicks or the actual result. And I think we learned a lot from that, realizing that, whoa, this was completely wrong, and we caught it early on, but it could have grown and become a big problem because it was related to funding as well. So yeah, that's one example, I think.
Thank you. Amy?
I think two things jump to mind, and they're both things that I think we all deal with. The first is, you have a fantastic sustainability story, you've created a press release, you're ready to share it with the world, and then it gets translated by teams into many different languages. And one of the, in where the original might said, "We are one of thee," suddenly in another language is, "We are thee." And you're sort of overstating your accomplishment, and it's a minute thing, but it actually can make a big difference when you're translating. So it goes back to being very, very careful and reviewing and understanding that the actual words that were used have to be the same words that are used when translated. And I think the other piece goes back to what I talked about at the beginning, this idea of the second greenest company in the world. At the time, it felt normal, fine to use that, it was fun, but things you say live on for a long time. So you may 15 years later have people still using it, and now it doesn't feel appropriate or the right thing to do. So how do you keep people moving along to get rid of that easy, memorable line that you gave them, which in the world today isn't actually a good line to use anymore. And so I think that's just an ongoing challenge we all face. It's such a dynamic space. Things are moving so quickly. People, weigh in, they learn something, they get it, and then you need to change, and they're not really changing as quickly with you in your messaging. And I think that's an ongoing challenge we all face.
Good point. Good point. Edvard, anything you want to add?
Well, I think just the importance of having sustainability with you when you do also other types of communication, actually, because just an example, we did one of our branding campaigns, we called it the Loader in the Glass Labyrinth, where we had one of our self-driving mining trucks navigate through a labyrinth of glass. And in the end, we crushed the glass just to show that it was actual glass. And yeah, guess the sort of feedback we got on that in some of the social channels, that how can you do this? This is a waste of glass, etc. Even though we had a clear message that everything was recycled, etc. So just be mindful of how things appear to the target audience. That's a lesson I take with me from that campaign.
Very valuable lessons. Thank you for sharing. Before we wrap up, I'd like to ask each of you if there's one recommendation you'd give to businesses on telling their sustainability story, what would it be? Amy?
Start with the data. I think it's most important that you don't start with the story, you start with the data and you start with the facts, and then you build from that. That's going to make sure you're always ethical, compliant in telling a true story. Even if the data is we're piloting something and don't necessarily know the end result, that's still a fact. So I think that, and then as an adjunct to that, make it relevant to the audience. What's interesting to somebody who's a real, sustainability geek might be very different than what's interesting to a customer who runs a fast food restaurant, a person who eats in the fast food restaurant, somebody in an airport. So you need to really make your messages relevant or it's going to be lost.
Thank you. Matt?
Yeah, I think I was on it before, and it starts with data. You need to measure, you need to understand, you need to do your research, and once you have that, it becomes much easier to sell when I go to Edward and the storytelling. So to appear sustainable, you need to be sustainable. It's that simple. You need to start at the core of the company.
Yeah, thank you. Edvard?
Yeah, I think I'll build a little bit on what Amy said. Make sure to be relevant to the target audience you want to reach with that specific message, and do that by finding a creative edge so you can build fame around the story that you want to tell. But at the same time, also ensure that it is firmly grounded in your business. You need to make sure that sustainability is integrated in your business and then tell the story that way. Otherwise, you risk losing.
Yeah, well said. Well, that brings us to the end of this episode of Let's Talk Global Business. We'll be back next time with a focus on a new topic. Thank you, Amy, Edvard, and Mats, for sharing your insights with us. You can find more content on sustainability and listen to the entire catalogue of podcast programming from the Conference Board by visiting our website, conference-board.org. Until next time on Let's Talk Global Business. Thank you.